Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We're still in the morning or whatever time you're going to be watching this. Thank you guys all for tuning in to Career Jam and Entrepreneurship. We guys are so lucky that we have Angelina Darasaw with us today, who is the founder and CEO of the C-Suite Coach, which is a social enterprise whose mission is to scale coaching for diverse working professionals and small business leaders. C-Suite Coach collaborates with employers to create business solutions that empower and educate teams, as well as retain and engage diverse employees, which we know how important that is, given with everything going on. The research proves that having a diverse workforce increases not only employee retention, but also ensures it increases the company's bottom line. And so without further ado, thank you, Angelina, for joining us and agreeing to be on the Career and Entrepreneurship Jam with us. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Really a big fan of Code Fever Miami and all of the work that you all do. I actually had a great opportunity in Miami recently to be a part of an excellent tech and football camp around the Super Bowl. So that was really exciting. But I'm here today to just have a conversation and answer any questions that you might have around navigating your career or what it's like to build a business. And I thought it might be helpful if I just shared a little bit about my background and some of the key philosophies I just employ when it comes to thinking about how I run my business, how I run my life, and really my philosophies on all of that. So I'm going
Cool.
to share a couple of slides if that's okay.
Yeah, no, for sure. Get right in.
Okay, great. So I am going to go ahead and present my screen. And again, thank you for having me. So just want to kick it off. I love this quote. I really like to read, and if any of you are during quarantine having the opportunity to pick up some new books, I really encourage it. I think that is one of the key things to maintaining creativity, to maintaining fresh ideas and new perspective and new thoughts. And I was reading this book once by Tayari Jones, and this quote came up: "Home isn't where you live, it's where you launch." And it really stuck with me for a number of different reasons. I think sometimes we get really grounded in our comfort zone and where we begin something and think that we have to stay there and live there. But really, every opportunity that you always have this choice of sticking with something that's really comfortable or leveraging that to be a launching pad. And any place that you're in is a home for that moment, but it's always a choice of, if you're going to live there, is it the right home for you? Or is this going to be a launching pad for something else? I think this is really important because we're not always comfortable with the places where we begin. Sometimes there's things in our realities that we'd like to see differently and that we'd like to see change. And for many of us, that leaves the opportunity for letting that home be a launching pad. So uh, there's an opportunity for growth there, and everyone has a story. For some people, it is an absent parent. For some people, it's other types of trauma. There's a great book I read that talks a lot about trauma, and the author just mentions that for us as humans, we're all going to face trauma. Trauma is actually super normal, right? So it's not a matter of when something is, or if something is going to happen to you that might throw you off your balance. It's really a matter of when. And knowing that trauma is normal, there is an opportunity for growth for yourself and also for everyone you engage with, knowing that they come with a story. And the opportunity is to not be that trauma, but really choose how you're going to grow from that, and choose how you're going to leverage that as an opportunity to create and to help others. Something else that just stands with me as really important. I love this idea. If any of you have seen Chimamanda's TED Talk, she talks about the importance of allowing for multiple narratives. And single stories create these stereotypes. They create this idea that there's only one way to be something, and that one story can often become the only story. So for me, why I'm so open and sharing my upbringing, when especially when it comes to the space of thinking about careers and thinking about entrepreneurship, is because I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. I didn't come even from a family that most people might think is the formula for a successful career, right? And that is important because we all have different backgrounds and upbringings. And I think it's really important to make sure that we're sharing that we all have the opportunity to create a space for ourselves and create opportunities and seats at tables. And we all belong at these tables. And it doesn't matter if you've come from a neighborhood that people don't want to go to late at night. It doesn't matter if you come from a single parent home or a young parent home. Your space and your story is worthy of being told, and you really deserve the opportunities that come your way, and you deserve to have a full career to run your business and do everything else. And oftentimes I think about the covers of entrepreneur magazines or the idea of what a CEO looks like. And that lens tends to be very, very narrow, and there needs to be a shift in that. So I can't talk about my life without sharing that I also went to a private school. So this is right across from Central Park on the Upper East Side. If, I know you all are in Miami, but this is like I don't know, the South Beach fancy Ritz or something, right? If you're in Miami, the Upper East Side of New York, it was about a 2-hour commute for me each way. I spent most of my days waking up very, very early to get on a bus, to a train, and then walk, and then go to school all day, take classes, and then do it all over again with heavy textbooks at the end of the day. And that experience was really interesting for me. I felt each day that I was weaving between two different worlds, and that really helped ground me in the injustices that happen in our society, and what it looks like when you're born on one part of town and what it looks like when you're born in another. For a lot of the people that I went to school with, sometimes I was the first Black person they were seeing. They often, when my mom would come pick me up, would assume that she was someone else's nanny, as opposed to being a parent of the school. And just knowing how different my experience was from the experience of peers in my neighborhood was something that always was unsettling to me, because it just had really to do with the fact that some are given opportunities, some aren't, and we all have to fight in this world to create whatever reality we want for ourselves, and there needed to be a leveling of that. So at a very young age, just from getting a scholarship to go to this private school, I always just thought about what it would look like for me to incorporate social justice as a part of the philosophy of my life. And it was really the foundation, as I'll talk about in just a couple minutes, of what started me on my journey to thinking about what career I would build for myself. So I always just think back to, if any of you have watched Gossip Girl, that's what it felt like. And I always look at the pictures of Gossip Girl and I'm like, you know what you don't see in any of these pictures? Oh, yes, Black people. There are none. And that's what it felt a lot like at private school as well. So I had such a great time in private school that I said, you know what, let me go to some more. So I went to Davidson College in North Carolina. And, I'm joking, I'm being sarcastic, but it was what I thought would be a really different experience. It was very similar in terms of the differences in what the average student looked like versus what it felt like my experience was coming in. But going to school in the South was an excellent opportunity for me to B, what I'm learning was really an opportunity to be a big fish in a small pond. There was so much that I explored while I was on campus. I had amazing internships. So I interned every summer at major media organizations, CPG companies, and kept those relationships throughout my internships that helped me start my career and launch my network, that helped me build a career for myself. And it was also great because being in a small school, I was able to do things that I never would be able to do if I went to a large school. So I found myself on a Division I track team. I am not fast. If any of you want to race me, I will let you and you will win because I am not fast at all. I do like long distance running now, but when I was at Davidson, they had me as a sprinter, and that's what you could do at a small school. I was also allowed to choreograph dance. If any of you want to check out my TikTok, it's not there because I cannot dance and I don't know how they let me choreograph. But I say that to say I was always allowed to do things that creative and create. And I really value that opportunity because it allowed me to not be worried about what other people are thinking, but really think about what would fulfill me. What do I want to try? What do I want to give myself the opportunity to create? After Davidson, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do with my career. So I said, you know what? Let me go through some more school. And I found myself at Wake Forest University, also in North Carolina, just up the road, about 45 minutes away. I got a master's in management, and just thinking about the importance of education for me there, what was really valuable was my whole college experience was really centered on humanities and social sciences. I was a political science major. I had a concentration in international studies with a focus on Latin America. And I never really, apart from a few core curriculum classes, I think I had one math class, didn't really think about business much. So I had all this internship experience and I was getting real world experience with business, but principal concepts that really I needed to understand in terms of economics, in terms of looking at financial statements, evaluating an annual report for a company, understanding basic contract law. I had no experience in. And so going to Wake Forest was really an opportunity for me to get that grounding and get that foundation. Was something that I didn't know that I would need at the time, because I'll be transparent, in my first few jobs that didn't necessarily have an impact. But when you think about launching a business later on, having that foundation and knowing what I needed to know more about, having at least the right questions to ask, really set me up for success. So I really valued that opportunity. I would say throughout my professional career, I also would take advantage of any program that had a professional development or personal development lens that could help me grow. And all of those experiences were really clarifying and helped me to understand more about myself, more about my value system, and more about what I wanted to get out of a career. So I found myself in fellowship programs. I found myself with an executive coach at a very young age. That was courtesy of my mother once again. I wanted, my birthday would come around, I'd want nice shoes or a bag or something like that. And my mom would say, yeah, no, I'm going to get you some executive coaching sessions. And that helped me to work on blind spots, get more feedback on what was working and how I showed up professionally. It helped me to have some accountability when it came to goal setting. And it also helped me to really identify what my purpose and what my mission was for my own life. And it kept coming back to that theme I talked about, which is making sure that there's a leveling of opportunity that I saw at a really young age, the direct impact of that lack of equity and opportunity. Other fun things that I always just like to call out, because I believe that, especially as women, for all people, but I just think about the really narrow lane people try to put women in, and it's really important to own that we have the opportunity to be multifaceted. We can have master's degrees and wear lipstick and high heels if we want to, or not if we don't, right? So personally, I really enjoy beauty and being a part of that space. I did pageants for a while in my early adulthood. And while I was working full time, I found myself in a campaign for Procter and Gamble called the My Black is Beautiful campaign, and I represented Pantene. And I found myself in national ads in a lot of major publications. So I was working full time and also pursuing other things that were really interesting to me and represented holistically the picture of who I was. So the thing I would just say there is don't feel pressured to fit into any box or to think that to be the professional you want to be, you can't also be an artist, you can't also be a musician, you can't try other things that fulfill you. It's important for your own wellness and your own just enjoyment of life. We have so much limited time on this earth to live fully. That's a gift that we've been given in this generation, so millennials and younger, that maybe our parents didn't have. I have right now two living great grandmothers specifically. I have two other grandmothers, but my great grandmothers, one is 98, one is in her late 80s, and we have conversations all the time about what their upbringings were like. I was chatting with one of my great grandmothers who's 98 years old about one of my younger cousins who she was just saying she's going through such an awkward phase. I don't understand what's wrong with her. She's about 12 years old. And I said, well, grandma, adolescence is really awkward. And my grandma says, wow, I don't understand adolescence because I didn't have one. She started working as a maid when she was 12 years old. So the the sacrifices that our parents and our grandparents had to make, they didn't really have the choices we had in terms of even thinking about ideas of what is my purpose or what is my mission. For them, it was primarily just thinking about providing. And because we have this opportunity, I find it to be fundamentally important that we are really centered on living fully and thinking about what that looks like for us. So my business has been around for now going on 5 years. It'll be 5 years officially in August. We've had such great opportunities to partner with major organizations, get some great press features, and I'm really proud and grateful for that. One thing I will say, though, is after 5 years in business, I can tell you, you will experience a number of pivots. I mean, there'll be the pivots that you plan for and the pivots that you don't expect. Right now, for instance, in quarantine season, it's been about 6 weeks. And that may not sound like a long time, but for a business, that can be a make or break period. There's data that shows, for instance, that some businesses typically only have about 2 weeks of cash flow, right? So not being able to operate the way you normally would in a time like this can end a business. So I think it's important to think about coachability, think about being able to be innovative and adapt as things change. Again, there'll be those changes that we expect. There'll be some changes that we even plan for, but then there'll be the changes that come out of nowhere that hit us in the face, and we have to continue to find a way to balance that out and be prepared for that. So that being said, I think it's really important to not, when we think again, home doesn't have to be where you live. It's a place where you launch. Thinking about that statement in a lot of different ways. When you start something, that doesn't have to be the place that you live and say, I'm only going to do it this way because that was my initial vision. It can also be a launching pad for other things. I'll tell you, when I started my business in 2015, it started as an app. It was an app that was a B2C, so business to consumer model, to connect coaches to professionals within an app. It had chat-based functionality. And that just was not the right model for my business ultimately. So we had to pivot. And since we've pivoted, we the first pivot was really focusing on doing training and development exclusively for large organizations. So we switched from a business to consumer model to a business to business model. But then the next pivot even went a step further, and we started doing coach management services. So we started staffing coaches for large companies who had coaching programs. We started to train and manage and onboard coaches and do a lot more work with really the staffing and management of coaches. And that was a big shift as well. So I say that to say, even in 5 years, I've had a couple more pivots. There's probably some that I'm not even remembering. And again, with quarantine, I'm experiencing pivots as well. So I just want to go back to that idea again. Just looking at the time, I think I have like 5 more minutes, so I'll speed it up. I'm a talker, I can talk all day, but I love this image. It's very popular in thinking of the inclusion space, just this idea of thinking about what it means to get to a space in our society where we have equality, thinking about what it means to create equity, but then also looking at the reality of where we sit. And the goal of my company, or the mission that is part of my personal mission, as well as it impacts the mission of the company that I've built, is really just thinking more about how we can get to this place of equity in terms of resources for working professionals, in terms of resources for small business. And that really is the foundation of everything that I do, because again, I've seen firsthand the impact and different resources. When I started, in one neighborhood, and I would wake up at 5:30 in the morning and start my day here, and then just 2 hours later, I'm in a space where most people who I went to school with, I remember going visiting students at their homes, and they didn't know where their irons were because they had people and staff in their house to do all those things for them. And it just really impacted opportunities and our realities in many ways. So I'm going to skip ahead. We have just a couple more minutes, and I want to make sure there's time for questions as well. But one thing I will say is there has been growth and opportunities in terms of some more representation, but it's still really, really minimal when it comes to representing what the population looks like. So there's some ceilings that have been shattered. There's some faces here that hopefully if you don't look up Black CEOs later, Black Fortune 500 CEOs, and you should see all these folks who are, some are current, some are past. But the idea is, it's on all of us now to create a future. When I think about what it means to be a person who advances in a career as a Black person, as a woman of color, it is creating visibility so that other people see that they can do it as well. It's creating hiring power. It's creating influence. That all has a shift. When there are more people of color at the table, when there are more women and Black people, we think about the qualifications, for instance, even of people who are looking for jobs differently. We have a different lens, and that allows and invites more representation. So we all need to play a role in growing in our careers and growing as business owners so that we can have further impact in our societies. I'm going to skip more, because I want to leave time for questions, but just a couple things, again, as I think about philosophies that are really important to me. The idea of philanthropy was also instilled in me in a really young age, and I'll be very transparent. Now, do I feel so much abundance? Yes. When I was growing up, the reality is, again, as you can imagine, in a teenage parent home, as my mom was going through college and finishing high school, I did not always have a lot of physical means, a lot of emotional support, yes, and all of that, but things from a financial standpoint may not have always been the best situation. But nonetheless, everyone in my family, I would grow up seeing my grandfather do the bread ministry in churches, seeing my mother always giving her time and her resources to organizations she was passionate about, and recognizing that we have something to give influences how we feel about ourselves. And there's always something. It might be your time, it might be your skill, it might be your talent. A lot of people right now during quarantine, COVID season, are asking, how can I help a small business? It doesn't necessarily have to be money if you don't have it, if you're struggling financially yourself. But if you have a skill or a talent, you have something that you can give to offer someone else. And the more that we embrace that we have as opposed to we don't have, it really influences how we feel about ourselves. And I think that's important. I always, just two more, and I promise I'm done. But I always just think about this picture. I won a pitch competition for my business back in 2017, and these were the investors. If you know anything about the investor space, you probably recognize their faces. And I would always look back at this picture and laugh, because it's so intimidating to be up there pitching and look at people that look nothing like you and try to represent your credibility and your credentials and why you are deserving of that space. But that's one way to think about it. The reframe of that, the other perspective is, I'm in the same space that you're in, right? So if I'm here and you're here, why would I assume for myself that you belong here and I don't? We really have to own and understand that our parents and grandparents, I talked about my great grandmother working at 12 years old, they worked very hard for us to be in these rooms, and we're doing ourselves and our ancestors a disservice if we don't own that we belong to be in those spaces. So just kind of like my last-ish point is, again, as I think about underrepresented groups and the spaces that we get to be in now that our parents didn't have access to, our grandparents didn't have access to. If we want to keep creating more of those spaces for other people, it's important for us to embrace our authentic selves, because that then allows other people to walk into rooms authentically and be themselves as well. So I don't go into rooms and pretend that I had an upbringing that I didn't. I do think it's important for colleagues or clients who work with me to see that, yes, I am here, and maybe those stereotypes you had about people from this neighborhood or from this income or from this kind of parent style, you need to understand that that is not the reality. And here is a true representation of who I am. So the more that I'm my authentic self, the more that I can create opportunities for other people to not have to feel like they're in this space to change who they are. So I have so much more to say, but I want to stop there and open up for questions. So I will be quiet and stop sharing my screen. And I just want to thank all of you for just taking the time to hear. Of course, I can answer any business questions. I can answer any questions about some of the places I worked. I had a career for 7 years before starting my own business, doing digital business development at two top media companies. So happy to take on any questions, but wanted to share some of my personal story with you all. So thanks.
Awesome. I'm glad that was a great presentation. Thank you so much. So we have a couple questions that came in, but I wanted to be able to ask kind of like, so what are some advice that you have for especially career professionals who are trying to navigate this time, either climb into their career, find the right fit? Before it was kind of like in a lot of the work you're doing is helping diverse professionals find, the business or the corporation that they would want to work with. But now skills are shifting and the needs are shifting. So what are the recommendations you have for them, and still looking for opportunities?
So the two key skills that I would recommend, one, really focus on always upskilling yourself. So thinking about tangible skills that you can acquire always at any opportunity you have. So right now, for instance, Ivy Leagues are offering free courses. There are some courses that are very for personal development, but then they're also offering free coding courses. There
Yeah.
are a range of really technical things that are being offered. And I would just think about what makes sense for my path and where I see myself professionally, and can I take advantage of this? Right now, take advantage of what's free, but there are some times where you may even have to invest in yourself. If you're working for a large company, they may even have resources where they can invest in you. When I was working at Viacom full time, they had tuition reimbursement. I went to NYU for several courses for executive education that helped me in terms of thinking about digital analytics, which is ended up being something that has helped me in so many ways. I'm now an adjunct professor in digital analytics at NYU, right? So crazy that upskilling helped me to later get more money for my own self. So, think about that. Think about, does my company offer any sort of tuition plan where I can get reimbursed for taking courses?
Mhm.
So upskilling is one. And then the second thing I would say is nurture relationships. It is so hard for all kinds of people, for all kinds of reasons, to think about relationships. Myself, I'm a very introverted personality. I'm great at flexing, I'm great at presenting, but sometimes that one-on-one interaction can feel overwhelming. But we have to ground ourselves in knowing that people want to work with people they trust and that they like, and that those relationships are what can make a difference in your next move and in your next step. And we have to prioritize maintaining and managing those relationships.
Awesome. So we have a question that was like, what is your day-to-day like?
So very busy. I actually found myself complaining last night. And when I complain, I like take a pause and remind myself to be grateful, because if I wasn't busy at all, that would also be a problem.
Yeah.
I would say even in COVID, it's been really busy. So as I mentioned, some of the things that we do are management services as well as training and development. So our days are really filled with managing staff and contractors that work with us, maintaining relationships with our clients.
Mhm.
Looking for new business is always going to be a small portion of every day as well. And then when it comes to the training and development piece, sometimes we're creating content that we will leverage for our clients also. So on any day, I would say there's probably a Zoom presentation like this if we have a training commitment. And then it's lots of calls with staff and helping them make sure that they're meeting their KPIs so we can fulfill on our client engagement.
Awesome. And so another question we had was, how do you suggest pitching to brands, companies in the time of social distancing and staying at home? Like, what are some tips and strategies?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I've seen some folks land new business in this time. I've seen that happen well for a lot of folks. I would just think about really identifying what they're saying in the press, what they're saying their need is, and thinking about what you specifically can offer that can adjust to that. So when I talk about pivot, this may not be the time to think about what you traditionally have been doing. This might be the time to be thinking about what it could be in my wheelhouse, but I might need to tweak some things to make it fit. Because right now, the traditional way you might have been operating may not make sense for that large company. So, if, for instance, I see that a large company is offering a grant for Black and Brown businesses, can I suggest, if I'm in the space of doing coaching and mentoring, for example, can I suggest I offer coaching to help them prepare on how to apply for this grant properly or use their grant or something like that. So just thinking creatively about your space and seeing what you can tweak to adapt to what that client is saying that they need.
Great, great. Another question they had was, how did you get Google as a client? Tell us your story in that.
Yeah, I'll tell you the quick and dirty. Networking. So again, like I said, nurturing relationships and being intentional about relationships is important. In front of me, I have a bulletin board where I always lay out my goals, and one that's consistently on there is intentional networking. So I was speaking at a panel, and someone came up to me afterwards. Previously I was working with Wix. They were a client as well, and they asked me to speak at an event. And someone came up to me afterwards and asked to exchange information. Couple months later, we met for coffee. It was a great meeting. And afterwards, she said she had networked. She was an avid networker as well. Someone from Google was looking for an opportunity, and she said, it really doesn't fit what I do, but I think it would be a great fit for you. It was the quickest turnaround in contract I've ever seen in my life. I spoke with them that week, and that same week I landed the contract. So I think the key takeaways there would be open to meeting new people. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, and as a small business owner or even as a busy career professional, you may not have a lot of time, but you do have to make time to nurture and to build new relationships, because otherwise opportunities that are out there you're just going to miss from the simple fact that you won't learn about them.
Correct. Awesome. Great advice. Um, oh, and so it's like, so when you were able to, so when you made the connection, was it like did you have to do a formal pitch or a slide presentation?
All of that, yes.
Okay, awesome. Another question from Natasha. Hi, Natasha, is how are you managing your time? Any tools that you use that work for you?
Yeah, so a couple things I do for myself, because otherwise I will go crazy. I'm addicted to calendar, and I calendar in reminders. If, for instance, a good example of this is we had one client that we were in conversations with, and with COVID, they had to put some things on pause. We made calendar reminders to ourselves that we need to circle back with them at the exact date that they said we should circle back. So it's like things like that. Calendar everything, calendar reminders for follow ups,
Mm-hmm.
calendar reminders for even lunch or times of the day where you don't want to take meetings, so that people aren't blocking. For instance, everyone who works with me, for instance, has an open access to my calendar, and they can book time wherever, but I book out for myself times where they cannot book. So I think that's one thing that's really helpful. I also do think that just keeping track, especially during quarantine where days might be a little bit different, of an active to-do list and crossing things out has been extremely helpful for me as well. So really basic tools, but I love those too.
All right. So we have a question from Kim. As an introvert, how did you overcome all those fears that many introverts have of public speaking and interacting one-on-one with people to get where you are?
Yes. So I would say practice, practice, practice. And I always think about, like, what were my first public speaking opportunities? There are a couple of things, and it sounds so simple, but it's crazy. When I was growing up in the church, my mom put me on the hospitality committee. I hated it because it meant every Sunday I had to go up and announce, I had to read a scripture and announce a welcome to all the visitors in the church. But it meant that I had to speak every week, right?
Mhm.
And that meant I had to do some preparation. I couldn't use the same scripture every week. There were like just things that I had to do to create a heartfelt welcome. So that was one of my early speaking opportunities in high school. I looked for opportunities to have a voice early on. And I think the more that you do that, even at family gatherings, as simple as it was, I mean, we were always encouraging each other to use our voices. So at the Thanksgiving table, everyone has to go around and say something they're thankful for. And I would use all of those opportunities as practice anytime you can, because the more you do something, there's that 10,000 hours rule, right? That Malcolm Gladwell talks about. The more you do something, the more it becomes second nature. So I would just use what seems like the most small, minute things as, this is me speaking. And if you look at it that way, you're probably already doing it more than you realize. So I would think about, why am I not nervous here, but I'm nervous here? And can I create some sort of system in my mind to eliminate some of the nerves that come up with that and recognize that I am doing it more often than I think.
Yeah, that's actually great advice. I think to that, like so for me, I for those who I realized I didn't give a full intro, I run the Black Professionals Network here in South Florida. And so for all my life, everyone thought that I was an extrovert, but really I feel like I'm on the middle. And in the same way, like my dad's a pastor, so I would have to go in and like speak to kids. I had to do Sunday, they put me on the Sunday school committee. So it's like, which I love the kids, but it's just like, it made me like, when we had to do reports, I was always have to like speak. And practicing that was really very helpful. So then it was like, as now with the network, I have to meet so many people. It's like, I just got so used to like just talking to people. And then I always also think it's like, a lot of it is just having conversations, just like realizing like this person, even if they're like, like feeling like they're more extrovert, like they're still, they want the same things as you, and it's sometimes it's connection, and then just sometimes it's like having those conversations tend to be very helpful. So I just been like, that has been definitely very helpful as well. So definitely great advice.
Just
um
a quick thing on that, I would say also is just have your go-to stories, because I think sometimes one of the things that might make us uncomfortable in one-to-one interactions is, what do I say?
yeah.
So, in general, when you're networking, there are a couple of standard questions that are going to be asked. Have in your mind some practice stories that you feel comfortable with as answers to those questions. So you're not caught off guard, you don't feel uncomfortable, and that helps you prepare as well.
Awesome, awesome. So next we have from Honor. Okay, do you accept to be shadowed from women entrepreneurs living abroad? So do you, I think the question more is like, so do you accept, do you accept mentorship, like mentees? I think,
Yeah, so that one is an interesting one to answer. I don't know about how it would work with abroad, but I would say I'm very open to really targeted conversations. For me, that works best because I think that for really, I just believe in providing value to people, and I don't know that following me around a day would do that, but I do think having targeted conversations around an area where I do have expertise and can be helpful is the best way that I can serve and give back to others. I think you're on
oh,
mute.
there we go. I was trying to open see exactly is. So next question, how do you network and grow in this current COVID-19 world? That's a good question.
Yeah. So, a couple of things I would think about. One, there are relationships that you already had in place, and I would want to make sure that those relationships are not falling by the wayside. So do the check-ins. I've been saying over and over again, now is a really good time to extend humanity to people. Uh, I've actually had personal friends who've lost their parents during this time. People are going through a number of different things right now. So I would proceed with caution and proceed with humanity and really ask people, is there anything, be very specific. How are you is very vague. It's not helpful. It can be triggering for people. I would instead say, is there anything I can offer to you that might be helpful during this time? Are there any resources that you might need? Or ask them about their self-care routine, and can you offer anything that might be valuable? So for instance, I have a former colleague from ESPN, and she knows that I love my workouts and I'm dying because there's no gym. And she's like, here, she sent me a whole curated list of at home workouts on YouTube that hit on different target areas. And I just loved it. So thinking about things that you can offer as value. I also think it's really important to remind people of if you're a business owner, reminding people of your services, staying top of mind. So sending those emails, sending those check-ins is really important. In terms of new relationships, you'll find that there are some people that are open to, and I always believe in the philosophy of focusing on what is there. So, if you reach out to 10 people, 3 people might not respond, focus on the 7 who do respond and see where you can build and at least have those initial conversations. For your business right now, it might be more brand awareness. Maybe people don't have as much to spend, but at least if they know about who you are and what you do, then they can interact with you once they're in a better financial position to spend with your business afterwards.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Angelina. Is there any more questions? I think we have last one more question that we can have for our session. Let's see to make sure I went over them. All right, I think that's it. So thank you guys so much. Oh, and happy early birthday. I'm a Taurus too, but my birthday's in May. so So I was like, I hope you have a wonderful birthday, even considering all that's going on. And definitely, I was wondering, like, how are people going to celebrate birthdays during COVID, giving all this stuff? I guess, do we do a personal day?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a personal day. So I do have some meetings in the morning, but I made my afternoon meeting free. And I still ordered myself a birthday cake. I've been eating pretty well during COVID, but on my birthday, I'm gonna do what I want. Have some,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get some pizza and some cake.
Perfect. Treat yourself. Yes, thank you guys. They were like, we should have a Zoom birthday party. I know. That's what my friends were saying. Like, do a Zoom birthday. And I was like, we'll think about it. I was like, that sounds like more planning. And I probably felt like I'd want to plan less.
That's right.
All right. So feel free, you guys, to definitely stay in touch with CoFever. This session was powered by them. I was happy to sit there and be a host. And thank you so much, Angelina, for taking the time out to share your insights and your story. I think you provided amazing perspective and insight. And yeah, I think that's all. They're wishing us all a happy birthday. Thank you guys. And yes, feel free to connect with either of ourselves on LinkedIn. Do you have what's your website that people can follow you on, or like where they can get more information?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check out csuitecoach.com and you can check us out on Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram and everywhere else at Lena Darasaw and at C Suite Coach.
Awesome. Great. All right. Have a wonderful one. Be safe, guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.